evening. I'd like to welcome you to the JOANNE Michaels Show, and tonight we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to talk about something that I thought would be very distressing in my life, and that was turning 50. But I've discovered that actually, instead of everything falling apart on me, everything strangely came together. So I am going to have on a couple of my baby boom cohort fellow people. My first guest is going to be the entertainer and author Steve Charney, who many people in the community know from his radio show on National Public Radio. And I also have on, and Steve got married on his 50th birthday, I might add. He'll tell us about that. I also am going to have on Evelyn Schneider from Gardner, New York. And Evelyn went to the Sky Ranch in Gardner and skydived on her 50th birthday. And last but not least is Luca Sharrow, who's coming on to talk about insurance, something at half a century, maybe some of us take a little more seriously than we did in the 60s. Anyway, I'd like to introduce my first guest, Stephen Charney, and thank you very much, Steve, for coming here from Woodstock.
First, let me just start off right from the beginning. I am not on NPR.
I knew that, and I was trying to remember what.
Actually, I was never on NPR.
What is the show?
I was on public radio.
Public radio,
but
okay.
Now I'm on WKZE.
So an NPR, National Public Radio, is national out of Washington, D.C.
That's right.
And you're out of the one in Albany. What do we call that? It's not
public
national.
radio.
Just
they
public.
Call it
it's
national.
not national. It's just public radio. That's what I was saying.
But they call
I knew it wasn't correct.
They call themselves the Northeast Public Radio Network.
Okay.
But I haven't been there for a few years. I'm now on other stations.
You know,
I'm on in New York. But I just wanted to make that clear.
You see, I'm a print person. I'm not a radio or TV person, really. But anyway, thank you for doing that, correcting me here. I was absolutely fascinated, and you and I are acquaintances from Woodstock. I mean, we don't know each other well, but I was absolutely fascinated with the fact when I was moaning about turning 50 that you told me you were planning to get married on your 50th birthday, and I thought perhaps it was another one of your jokes.
Yes, well, it's hard to tell.
Well, you had been living with your wife for 23 years, so I figured if you were going to get married, you would have done it somewhere in the last 2 decades.
Yes, you would have thought so, yeah.
I'm sure you're sick of everyone asking you this,
yes.
But what made you decide to get married and on your 50th birthday? Tell us. We're all want to know.
Okay. Well, first of all, to be 50 and not to be married, I feel you kind of like considered a schmuck, you know, in society. It's like, you know, what are you doing? You're 50, not even married yet? So there was sort of that.
You never were married,
pressure.
ever?
No, I never been
Oh, okay.
And part of getting married on my birthday was really, in a way, a little bit of a coincidence. I mean, not that we tried to avoid it, but it wasn't like I said, boy, I got a good idea, let's get married on my birthday. There were a lot of different considerations.
Like what?
Well, one, it had to do with finding, it had to be on the weekend because we wanted a small amount of family to come up, but those people who were working needed to have freedom. And second of all, for our honeymoon, I wanted to go to Fire Island, and so it needed to be kind of in the latter part of the spring, you know, as spring started moving, so I knew it was around that time we wanted to get married. And three, I will say that the condition that pleased me was to get married on my birthday was nice because I didn't really want to make a big deal out of being 50. And so I knew this was sort of like...
This would upstage it.
Upstage it very much. And so, except for the presents, I made sure everybody also said, you know, that's my wedding present. I want my birthday present, yeah. So I knew that it would be a good time to sort of slip into that 50 easily.
Now I know people.
And also, I always forgot our anniversary. I mean, we would not. We always had an anniversary, even though it wasn't a wedding anniversary.
Anniversary of what?
Well, we never really knew, but we picked September 5th as our anniversary, and we weren't sure if it was the first time we dated, first time I met her, and in fact, the funny story is, one day we're driving in the car, and she says, my wife, Elisa, now says, you know, our next anniversary is our 20th anniversary. This was a few years ago. And I said, you know what, this year I will not forget our anniversary. She says, because you forget every year, I forget every year. I said, this year I will not forget my anniversary. I promise it. And she says, okay. When is our anniversary? I said, September 5th. And she goes, and what date is this? I said, it's September 10th. So both of us have lost it. So now I'll never forget my anniversary.
Well, actually, now that I think about it, my ex-husband and I did celebrate the day we met. We met on an airplane, and we did celebrate that. We lived together for a few years before we got married. We celebrated that as our anniversary.
You need an anniversary.
You need an anniversary, right? I mean, what would Hallmark do without people like us, right? So now I'm going to ask you the question I'm sure you get asked too. Is it any different? Why is it different after 23 years? Is it or isn't it?
Okay. Don't do it. I'm kidding. There are subtle differences. You know, when there are subtle differences.
Did
it's
she
not
change
as
her
if,
name?
No.
Okay.
No. But I'll tell you, you know, when you, it's not like I'm a young man and I'm getting married and now, you know, I'm moving out of my mother's house and we're going to start a family and my whole life has changed, obviously. If I've been with her for 23 years already, there isn't that much.
Why won't you start a family?
Well, she's past childbearing years, and she's not interested anyway. And
is she older than you?
Yes, 10 years.
10 years older. Hey, ladies, there is still hope for those of you out there.
I mean, we look at each other. How did this happen? I mean, she was in her 30s when I met her, you know, and it's like, how did this? I was in my 20s, you know. Time
so
goes
was
by
she
fast.
right?
Everyone
So was
knows
she married before?
She had been married. She had kids. So you know, this was not something she was interested in.
Is there a big difference? Do you feel there's a difference? Everyone says, oh, when you're 30, there's no difference between 30 and 40, but as you get older, I mean, but I guess 50 and 60 is...
No. I mean, because you're always getting older.
Did it occur to you that you would never have children? Does it bother you that now that, do you think that that's an issue?
No, not enough. Every once in a while, you know, I see a little kid going by and I go, oh, that would be nice, I had a little kid, you know. But not enough. It's a pain, you know. I mean, I know there's a great enjoyment. I know that if I had a kid, I would love him. But it's a young person's game, you know. I mean, my stepson, I can now say my stepson.
Yeah, right, that's right.
I just had a kid 2 years ago, 2-year-old.
How old is he?
Which one? The kid or
the one who had
the stepson? The one who had the stepson.
I mean, the one who had the son. The stepson. How old is the stepson?
Charlie, bring it away. My stepson is about 35, and the baby is now 2.5 or something.
Mm-hmm. So you're like a grandfather.
I'm a grandfather. I'm playing that role. I'm definitely playing that role and enjoying it. But when I see what they have to put up with, I mean, getting up at late at night, this is for young people. I mean, I don't want to do this. You know, if I don't get 8 hours, I'm done the next day. You know, so it's a lot of aggravation, and I'm fine the way it is. You know, I think if I was with somebody who was really pushing me, I would go, okay, yeah, let's try it. You know, but I know it's a tremendous commitment.
Yeah, you just have to hope for a good one, like I got.
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, we could do a whole thing just on this. I mean, nobody wants to hear my psychological problems.
But actually, you and I met because you entertained my son and his friends at his 4th birthday party, and he's now graduating high school.
That's right.
And I remember, I don't know, that's how I originally met you, because I called her. Everyone said you were great. You come to the house, you do this thing, the kids sit for an hour or whatever it was, and they're clean and they listen and they're in one place, and the adults can be happy and have their party in the kitchen. And I remember that very vividly. It's like you say, it goes by fast. It was 13 years ago. What do you still do that kind of work? I mean, do you still do children's birthday parties, or have you now do adults?
I've done everything. I do. You know, I have done. We will travel. You know, is my motto. Last year I did 157 shows. So I will perform at schools, festivals, theaters. I perform. I do perform at parties. I try to avoid them now in my career, but especially if they're close by or if somebody's willing to meet the price, I will do it. But most of my work is larger venues, schools, and as I said, the Rhinebeck Performing Arts Theater, which is where we are right now. I perform there twice a year. In fact, I'll be there this summer.
Oh, now
I'm around a lot this summer,
are,
all over this area.
See, it's good you don't have
I'm in
children.
Tivoli Day.
You would never be home. If you had children, you would never be home.
Oh,
157 shows a year. You'd be entertaining other people's children.
No, if you think about 157 shows, sounds like a lot, but the
Every other
306 every other day I go out for a couple of hours. That's not an 8-hour job.
That's true.
It's a pretty easy day.
You could take care of the baby. That's true.
But like everything else, a lot of the work is the preparation, the getting the jobs, brochures,
Marketing,
tapes, marketing, you know, the whole thing. But we're
Now,
doing the radio show.
When you moved to Woodstock, you moved around the same time I did. I've been there for over 20 years now. Didn't you work for WDST Radio initially? Wasn't that
I
your...
started on DST.
When
I've
it
been
was
on
a
many
fledgling
stations.
station? When it was
The first,
just
I was there the first week.
They
First
opened.
week they opened, I was there. I was there for 6 years. I did a live show. That's how I got my start in radio. From there I went to Hudson. Hudson has a station called WHUV, or HUC, I think. And I did that for about 6 months. Then I moved to public radio, WAMC, and I was there for 8 years. I did a daily show. And then from there, I went to WKZE in Sharon, Connecticut. I'm also down in the city, WNYE in New York. And I'm on the CAT, WCAT.
98.5.
98.5. I'm on Sunday mornings.
So you're a busy man.
Yes and no. No, I'm busier than anyone else. I think you're busier than
Well, we won't
I am.
argue.
You sound busier than I am. I mean,
I'm
tend
doing
to...
a lot of things, but I think I'm organized and I'm very organized. I've gotten more
tend
organized
to
in my
be.
old age. That has come, and my memory hasn't gone yet, which helps. But one of the things that was interesting too, you said that you do adult shows. What exactly
The
is
same
that?
thing as the kid show, but I do it without my clothes on.
What about Harry? Your
But
dummy,
boom.
is Harry nude also?
You don't want to see Harry nude. He doesn't have a good body.
Oh, okay.
I do adult shows, sure. I don't like to, necessarily, but I do.
Is that off-color humor?
Yes, I have a more, well, it depends on the crowd.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I can be off color. I did the Friar Tuck for a couple of years, for several years.
So what do
Like
you
Saturday
think?
nights,
Right.
college kids, and, you know, I had to be really, the dirtier the better.
Now, college kids, wait, okay, so to get back to this whole thing of turning 50, tell me what you felt as it approached, because we talked about this informally once. How did you feel about it? Did you think, some people feel pressured to have a lot of things together, other people, what was it to you, turning 50? Forget the marriage thing.
I
In
felt
your
like I was,
mind.
first of all, I felt like I was 50 for about a year or two anyway. I do that. If I'm 48 and 49, I'm already thinking 50, you know. I
You're
just do that.
preparing.
I'm
I know.
preparing for 50, and when you're living with a woman who's older than you, also you have no fear about feeling older or getting. She's pushing me. Come on, get your hair white. You know, you look too young. You know,
But she's
because I'm a
very,
young-looking 50.
but she's very beautiful.
She is.
A Norwegian
She is.
lady
She's
who looks a lot
Norwegian.
younger than she is.
She's great. She's
Okay.
got good bone structure.
Yes, I will attest to that.
Yeah, all those Norwegians are gorgeous. I've been over there several times.
It's a wonderful
and it's just
country.
unbelievable. Great country.
Yeah, we all feel ugly over there.
That's right. Anyway, so turning 50 wasn't that big a shock to me, and I feel good where I am. I feel great. I probably feel better than I ever have, on many levels. You know, the older I get, the wiser I feel I am. A lot of my earlier demons have disappeared. You know, the things that just plague you when you're younger, whatever it is. I mean, everybody's got different ones, you know, and as you get older, I think there's a tendency to leave them behind, at least in my case.
You mean insecurities?
It
Demons
could be
as
insecurities. I mean, it could be anything. You know, so for one person it's overeating. For another person it's low self-esteem. For another person it could be anything.
Well, I think I think we could say universally people tend to care less about what other people think and care more about what they think. I guess my TV show will attest to that.
Oh yeah, Joanne. Yes, you are the epitome of that.
Yeah, but I've always been. I mean, I just
I know.
happened to get the
I
show
know.
on the road now, and I got into a lot of trouble for doing that too, for being too honest. But it's just something I couldn't help myself. But do you think that's part of growing older and maybe turning 50 is a marker in that whole half century? It's frightening. I mean, we were the generation that was never going to trust anyone over 30.
I still don't.
I don't trust anyone under 30.
Well, that's kind of common. What's your question? There's a question in there.
Maybe what I'm getting at is, as you get older, don't you feel that you care less about out there? You know, it's like,
No, I don't feel that way.
care less about you care more
No.
about pleasing yourself.
No.
No. Uh-huh.
No, in fact, just the opposite. I have to disagree. For me, personally, I actually have joined society more. I feel less like a black sheep. I feel more value in the sense of community. I used to feel like I was special, like I was some sort of, the typical kind of, you see it a lot in Woodstock, people who kind of like walk around thinking, hey man, look at me, I'm better than the rest of the society. And I was a lot like that. Even though I wouldn't voice it, I realized later in my years, and I look back and went, God, I was really like that. I really was very smug and self-righteous in many ways. If I would give it lip service that I wasn't, I really was. And as I got older, I realized, hey, you know what? We're all in the same boat. There are good people and there are bad people. There are people you like, people you don't like, and it really has very little, less to do with their lifestyle and their opinions and philosophies. It's just their heart, how big their heart is.
Yeah, that's a good observation. But
and as I got older, I felt less like I needed that defense, less opinionated, and as a result, I felt more just open and more. I wanted to embrace the community more, and I love my community, which is Woodstock, but everybody's community. I just feel more relaxed about people, and I feel better about being part of society and following what people do. I mean, community has behaviors, and I don't. It's like I kind of take joy out of just being, Joe Schmo and Moses Lawn, on a weekend. I don't know. It's just a crazy thing. I mean, I'm eccentric enough that I still have this reputation. I mean, there's a guy who talks to dummies, and he does this wacky, crazy stuff. But like many performers, it's. That's the projection. That's the image you're projecting.
But you've been with the same woman in a relationship
there we
for 23 years.
So like, what am I? Yeah, it's pretty conventional.
Unusual.
But I didn't marry her. So.
But it's still to live with someone for 23 years at our stage of life. I mean, you were 27, right?
Yeah, but it only feels like about 2.
But Steve, that's a pretty unusual thing. The average marriage in America lasts 6 years. I mean, yes.
Well, not to say we didn't almost break up. I mean, we're hanging in there by like the skin of our teeth.
As eccentric as you might think, that would be considered a more conventional behavior.
Yes, that's right.
That's what I'm.
Well, it's all self-perception. In other words, my perception of myself is that. That doesn't mean that I was.
Right.
Who knows what you really are like. Or the way other people see you, I mean, you have a self-perception of what, I mean, if I could tell you what people think about you, Joanne, it would not be good.
That's fine, but you see, I don't care about that.
I know you don't. I know you don't, and that's the difference between you.
I really don't care what people think.
I do care, because I don't want to hurt people. I feel really strongly
about
that.
But there are people who deserve to be hurt.
Well, I know that's where
not a lot, but a few.
Well, that's where you and I mean, you have. No, I don't. I just disagree with that.
See, I think that there are people who cry out to be put in their place or to be exposed.
I think there's appropriate behavior. I think there's appropriate behavior, and some people need to be stopped. Yes, but.
Good, I'm glad we agree on that. Hey, I'm trying to.
But hurting is different. Hurting is motivation. Hurting is malice, and that I don't. That's hurting is like revenge, and I just don't feel that.
Well, my next book after The Joy of Divorce is The Joy of Revenge. But I always have a good time when I'm doing it.
Yeah.
But anyway, and there's always a purpose behind what I do, but I can understand what you're saying. I don't do it gratuitously. I do it for a reason.
Yeah, I know.
But in any case, what to get back to the whole aging thing, which I think is really, I think there may be a difference between men and women. Now, one of the things in this respect, you said, well, I have more of a sense of the community as a whole. I feel more connected to all this. And I said, well, I feel more like I don't care as much about what other people. I think women, and even me, we were all conditioned in the 50s and 60s to please others. This is something maybe they don't do in Norway. Your wife doesn't know. But it really was very much, and that all changed in the 70s with the women's movement. As much as I don't subscribe to all the stuff of the women's movement, the one thing it has done for women, and even these young women who tend to dissociate themselves from the movement, is it has freed women from that obligation. So maybe for our generation of women, it'll be the last generation who can say, as we age, we care less about pleasing everyone else and more about pleasing ourselves. I think if you please yourself, you end up pleasing everyone else too.
Oh, yeah.
Much more.
Oh, I'm not, yeah, absolutely.
So I was
agree
just
with you.
thinking, it was just something that occurred to me when we were talking about, and you said, no, and I thought, well, maybe there's a lot of women I speak to feel that that's the freeing part of turning 50, or being in your 50s, is that they're much more focused on themselves now. Most of them, not all of them. I know people in their 50s with young kids, but most of them, the kids are out, like, you know, and they're divorced, they're single, and they can really, they've never been single, and they're really enjoying it. You know.
Right, but I don't think it's an either-or thing.
No,
You can do
I agree.
both.
I agree with you. I think that that's absolutely true. And I think most people, men and women, strive to do both. But as you know, it's very difficult. You don't have children. You guys don't have children together, but you know, there's just so many hours in the day. And it's very hard. I remember the days when I was running a Hudson Valley magazine, my son was born. And I did that for the first 3 years of his life and had a husband. I was doing freelance writing. I was teaching at night at one point. I mean, we traveled a lot. And I think back, how did I ever do it? I was 35, that is true, 35, it was my 30s, 35 to 40, but it all got done, and it was a great time in my life. Everything got done. But I look now and I say, I don't really want to be that crazed, you know? I want to do more for, you know.
Well, I think nature gives us certain things at certain times in our lives. You know, the joke, should women have babies after 35? The answer is no. 35 babies is enough for any woman.
Thank you,
But
Stephen.
boom.
A clean joke on my show. Thank you. But
Well, anyway, what you were saying earlier, whether it's changed me. That was how we started
Yeah.
this conversation.
Right.
And in subtle ways it's changed. Not in big ways, but in subtle ways.
like what?
A comfort, a secure feeling, more relaxed, just in subtle ways, not big. You know, just a feeling. For instance, money. Suddenly, you know, and I think everybody has different things. Everyone would have a
Issues,
different
right,
issue. You know,
issues.
so there's certain specific issues that Elisa and I have.
But you
And
bought a
one of
house
them-
together before you were married.
Yes, and that in fact was sort of the
That was a leap of faith.
yeah, that was like sort of foreplay, you know, for the marriage. You know, you buy a house and then you know, okay, this is working, this is
Then
good.
you get married
you know.
after you buy the house. They used to get married and then buy the house.
Right.
Right?
Not our first house, but we owned. This was the house on Fire Island.
But she's in the real estate business, we might add. So
Kalish Real Estate, great real estate office. You should check it out.
there's no
Lisa
advertising
Glenn.
on public television. What I don't understand, okay, so money, how is money an issue though? In other words,
Oh, not in a big one,
Yeah.
but there would always be like, are you paying, am I paying, who's going to pay for this, who's going to buy the groceries? I felt it, and I know that she felt it in her own way, you know, making sure she paid it, because, you know, it's not like I charged her rent to live in my house. I built this
Oh, you
house.
built the house,
And it's in
okay.
my, so, you know, it's not like I'm going to say, well, you have to pay. So she paid bills, but, you know, we always tried to kind of even it, but now it's like, who cares, you know, I mean, like, whatever. You know,
Comes
go
in.
out, it's your money, my money, it's the
Doesn't
same
matter.
money. You know.
that's nice.
There's more of that.
Yeah.
There's more of that. Not
Yeah.
completely, but it's more.
Mhm. I don't know. I lived only for 3 years before I got married with my husband. But I guess the difference was you sort of, and also we were younger. I mean, I was 30, he was 35. So it was like we saw the future together. You know, it was like you really see those years ahead.
You don't see so much future.
Hey, I didn't have the future that I saw, but I saw it when I was
Yeah,
younger.
you saw a future.
I
Well,
saw a future.
we don't see a future because there ain't much of a future. That's what.
Well, what about growing old together?
Yeah, well, sure. Let's hope so.
I mean, that's, you know, now I guess that people our age I'm starting to hear, I have friends who are ill. I mean, with, you know, not unfrightening diseases. So you start, you know, you're at one point, everyone's getting married in the 30s, then in the 40s, a lot of people get divorced. Then you get to your 50s, cancer rears its ugly head more than ever
Well,
before.
Spalding Gray, I think we might have said this. Spalding Gray, I saw one of his shows, I forget, Swimming to Cambodia or something, where he's talking quite at length about the Bermuda Triangle of health between 50 and 53. Every man, he didn't really mention women, every man goes through some major physical thing, and if he gets through it, then he lives on. And with him, it was something with his eye that was
Really?
hard. He was going blind or something. And so I'm now waiting. Any day now, I'm dead. You know, who knows if I'm going to get through it.
Well, I
My
really,
tooth is bothering me. I got a dentist appointment right after this is true.
it might
It's
be
been
that.
killing me for 2 weeks. I'm going, this is it. If this is all it is, I've gotten...
So do you think of Spalding Gray on your shoulder saying, that's it, that's it?
Yeah, this is you're entering the Bermuda Triangle. I assume he means something bigger than a cracked tooth.
Well, 50 to 53 is when a lot of women go through menopause, right? I mean, you know, that's like the counterpart to that.
A lot of guys start, they have a heart problem at that point, or they develop some cancer, or a lot of things happen between 50 and 53, You're like past childbearing years, so nature just, gives you the finger, like we don't need you anymore. Get him out of the way, let the young people come in.
It's scary, isn't it? It really is scary. And having a young
Just gets
child,
worse.
I see, well, I mean, yeah, it just
I mean,
gets
look at
worse.
I talk to my father all the time, and I say to him, now I know what you were
Yes,
talking about
right.
when you said 50 and now I'm 50. He said, you still haven't known, wait till you're 70. And then the 80-year-olds say, hey, you don't know the 70-year-old 80.
Yeah. Well, there was going to be a person on my show today who's just turned 90. And he really is an inspiration. This guy doesn't have a hearing aid, he's very sharp.
Because he can't hear anything, but
No, he hears everything. He hears everything, and he's and I've had breakfast with him a couple of times in Kingston in a restaurant where that's where I met him, at Nico's Pharmacy, actually. Not Pharmacy, Nico's Luncheonette that used to be a pharmacy on Wall Street. But he's really an inspiration, and I think, true, I see him on the street sometimes, he's in a suit, he's going to his friends' funerals all the time, but I guess, that's the downside of living to 90. But it's also like, he's very independent, he lives on his own, he's got kids, daughters our age, he doesn't want to move to Arizona, I mean, this is somebody who's really, he was a very successful businessman, sold his house.
Mm-hmm.
But it's
He's
interesting.
lucky, he's lucky.
Yeah, he's very lucky. So I don't know. There's a downside to living that long, but I think our 50s will be good years.
These are the best years of my life so far. Well, wait, I've only been 50 for a month. I feel that these for the 50s are going to be great years.
I do too.
I do too. I'm just having a great time. I'm having a great
I went snowboarding. That was my thing. That was my 50-year thing. I said, okay, I'm going to try something new. I went snowboarding,
And you ice skate?
Well, I figure skate.
You sound like you're having a lot of fun. I know. We hang out.
Yes,
and
we do.
I hear your life. You have a lot of fun.
Well, I have to make up for the bad years of judges and lawyers. What are you going to do? Everything has yin and yang, right? You're a good Buddhist, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks.
I used to be a better Buddhist.
Oh, okay, a better Buddhist. Thanks for coming and joining these things.
Well,
it was a lot of fun.
It's been my pleasure, yeah.
I mean, I really enjoyed it.
Finally got it happening.
We finally got this on tape,
Yeah,
so when
we
we're
can talk
80,
about this.
we can watch
I can
ourselves.
go, look at him,
Look at
he's such a good-looking boy.
And there we will be.
Yeah.
10 years. We'll watch it every 10 years. We'll watch it 10. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Joanne.
Hello, I'd like to welcome you to the Joanne Michaels Show, and today I have a topic that is a little bit different than the usual real story. This show is about turning 50, something I did all too recently and something I was terrified of for many years, to say that I was half a century old. I somehow believed that everything was going to fall apart in my life, and interestingly, everything seemed to come together. So I have a few guests, some very interesting people who are joining me today to say how they celebrated their 50th birthday. There's a very interesting person who is here with me, my first guest, who celebrated her 50th birthday by going skydiving, yes, out of an airplane right here in the Hudson Valley. Another one of my guests, Steve Charney, the magician and performer, he got married on his 50th birthday to somebody he'd been living with for over 20 years. So 50 is sort of a real marker, and I think this is going to be a real fun show for a generation that wasn't going to trust anybody over 30. I think we've had to reevaluate. So anyway, I'd like to welcome my first guest, Evelyn Schneider, who comes from Gardner, correct?
Yes.
And thanks for coming here today. And we're going to also see a little video clip of you jumping out of the airplane, which I'm looking forward to. Tell me, how did this all come about? I'm sure this wasn't something you said when you turned 50 you were going to jump out of a plane.
No, no. Well, my father had airplanes, and I was always fascinated by being up in an airplane. When I moved to Gardner in the Purple House on Main Street, I'd sit out on my deck, and the sky would be filled with different color parachutes. My granddaughters loved it. So I have a friend who lives in New York, and he comes up on weekends every now and then. And we were sitting out there one day, and he said, you know, I'd really love to do that. And I said, you know, I would too. So he gave it to me as a gift.
For your birthday?
For my birthday. Skydive the Ranch is right near my home, stone throw away. So we decided we'd do it. We'd go together.
So you did.
And my last husband did not want me to go skydiving. He was really terrified. So after I got divorced, I thought, well, now I can go skydiving.
Let's see. Well,
Yes.
I guess it's sort of I skate, but at least my 2 feet are on the ground. You know, some people think you could kill yourself that way, but it doesn't seem to bother me. You know. But now, what was it like? I mean, what was it? Were you afraid at first, or did you just? I mean, it is sort of scary to sort of when you're stepping out of that plane. I watch people do it. I mean, scuba diving would bother me, and this. I think I would sooner do this than that.
Right.
Weren't you afraid of?
That was very interesting because, you know, on a spiritual level, the decision, the desire to go skydiving was connected with my wanting to be able to stay focused at a moment of intensity. So we had to change the date. And the night before, you know, I was all ready to do it, and then I had to put it off for a day. That night I couldn't sleep. My heart was beating faster than it's ever beaten before. I was more afraid than I was in, you know, giving birth to a child. I was very, very scared. The next morning I got up, I did an 8-mile run, and just went into that kind of zen, you know, look at the trees, watch the rabbits, count your breathing, and I felt much better when I got to the airport. My friend Fritz was, he was much more confident. He was just ready to get addicted, you know, let's go. And when we got there,
and he had never gone before.
he had never gone.
Okay.
No, this was we were going to do the tandem jump. I had researched tandem jumps and knew that they were pretty safe.
That's where you go together?
That's where you have an expert, Superman, who's on top. You get attached from a harness in 4 places. He has the parachute. You have nothing. You just have your harness and your 4 little clips, you know, onto Superman. And there you are, Lois, laying, you know, up there.
So you're attached to the parachute, but there's also somebody on top of your back who's an expert.
Right.
Okay, and he was going to be next to you doing the same thing? With an expert also?
With another expert.
Okay.
He had his own tandem expert.
Okay.
Right.
Well,
it was wonderful. It was wonderful in so many ways.
did
know,
you do it on your 50th birthday?
No,
Or was this a couple of days after or before?
It was a little bit past. It was actually a couple of months after. You know, the gift was given to me on my birthday, and then we had to wait till he was coming up next. He travels in Europe, you know, this, you know, everybody's the life that happens. And but when we got there, it was just like it reminded me of a carnival atmosphere. But anything that was important was happening up there. Everything else was just kind of getting ready for, you know, being in the sky. And they put you in this bus, a stationary bus. And you have to fill out all the forms. And the first question is,
I can imagine.
yeah, are you willing to die? You know, and it says check this box. You know, yeah. So I checked yes, and I.
What if you check no?
Well, then you don't go. If you're not willing to die, you don't go.
They will not allow you to go.
Right.
Boy, the lawyers must have had fun with this
Oh,
release, right?
Well, yeah, I can't imagine.
I have a lot of lawyers on my show. This is one of the few shows there are no lawyers on. Well, what did it feel like being up there? The wind, is it very, very windy?
There's a lot of pressure from wind. I imagine
How many
that
feet was it?
13,000.
13,000 feet, okay.
Right, you go up 13,000 feet, and my tandem master was so gentle. You know, he was kind of stroking me, and look at this mohonk out there. You know, there's the Hudson River, and you know, and I'm just kind of, we had gotten our little training, you know, 18 inches above the ground, you have to use a lot of imagination. 18 inches above the ground, you're supposed to jump and learn how to hang on to your harness, and then your tandem master says you're on the edge, and that was the most frightening part of for me, was being on that edge.
Of the plane before
Such a
you jumped
metaphor for life, you know, that transitional moment where your feet are half out and half in, you're 13,000 feet, you know, above the earth, you know, all those, you know, it just looks like some movie. And then you hang on to your harness, and I freaked out a little then. I went to hang on to the bar, and I just heard this, you know, no. And I thought, oh, you know, I'm supposed to, I wanted to be very obedient. You know, usually I'm kind of a rebel, but I said, oh no, you know, be obedient. Hung on to my harness, and then my guy had said, look at the propeller, because that will help you get into an arch naturally. So you look at the propeller, he says 1, 2, and you can see in the clip, he takes my head and puts it up because I'm so terrified.
So you're not supposed to look down?
No.
Okay.
If you keep your head up, you're more likely to go into a arch. I mean, my friend Fritz said during the training to the guy who's you know, he's all tattooed, you know, he's telling us what to do, and my friend Fritz, we went to NYU together, we've just been in books together, and he said to this guy, excuse me, what happens if I forget to go into the arch and I just kind of go into fetal position? And the guy looked at him and he said, you think too much, just arch. And my friend Fritz did go into fetal position. You know, he just kind of rolled out of the plane, and he, you know, he completely, you know, he forgot to open his chute, so the guy opened it.
Opened it for him.
Right.
Hey, maybe this is a reason.
You
You should go with somebody on top of your back, so you
Yeah, with a little help from my friend, if the Beatles only knew. So as you're, you know, when you jump, you're supposed to hang on to the harness until the tandem master taps your shoulders twice, and then you go into this W. And the idea is that the surface of your body is going to keep you balanced during the free fall. It's 120 miles per hour for about a mile.
Oh my goodness.
And I thought I'd have this, like, you know,
Yeah.
roller coaster feeling.
Right.
I was really afraid of that, but it just felt like I was floating.
Really?
A lot of pressure, just floating.
Wow. And then, and are you not supposed to eat before you go?
Oh no, my daughter went around like buying ice cream for the tandem master, for the instructor. She wanted to, you know, get an edge for me. I couldn't eat anything. Could not eat.
Must have been terrible.
Not a bite. I was just sitting there, you know, kind of trying to stay centered and you know, to stay focused on the moment. And my friend had said to me, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this on television, but she said, Evelyn, it's just like an orgasm. It's like a great orgasm. But you want to be awake for it. You want to really, you want to look around. You want to take it all in. And I didn't see anything. I was so focused, Joanne, on following the directions, on putting my hands out, on watching my altimeter, you know, on doing the check for where the ripcord was, on at 6:30, you know, knowing that I had to go like this to balance the body, and then I had to let the guy behind me know with the little baby waves that I was going to pull open the parachute, and then I had to give the pull. And I just kept rehearsing that in my mind. I think about how many complicated things I've done in life, and there were just a few simple things I had to do on the way down.
So that you didn't die.
Right. Or
unwilling to die.
Right.
But yeah, no,
Right.
that sounds incredible. You know,
It was
I'm
fun.
very, very shocked. You know, my 50th birthday was a lot less. I was in Florida, and I went ice skating that day, and I went out actually with my son to see a great movie at night. And there was really a whole psychological thing about shifting into that decade of 50. You know, I'm not in that 18 to 49 demographic anymore. I mean, I guess for me, but this is so dramatic. And maybe for you, do you feel that like you passed into another place from, you know, turning 50? I mean, for you?
I feel the same way, that it's quite a transition. And I don't know what it is about the number, because you think it's a day after yesterday.
Right.
I was born in 1950.
So was I.
So, you know, it's very easy to remember how old I am. And the skydiving felt very much like a birthing experience. You know, that
Or
there's,
rebirthing.
yeah, a rebirthing, because I feel so happy, you know, being in this part of life. I've heard it described as the adolescence, you know, of the second part of life, your 50s. It's a wonderful time to be alive. I have great kids, great granddaughters. I mean, there were times when I said, can we put them in the dryer on delicate for 10 minutes? You know, when they were teenagers, but now they're wonderful. They're absolutely wonderful. And to go up there in that airplane, to do something really free-spirited and fun, to leap. I mean, the whole thing seems like such a metaphor to me. But to go up and do something I'd never done before, because I think it's so important to keep doing new things in life. You know, to never go into stagnancy. I remember I was reciting to myself Nietzsche when I was doing that meditational run. You know, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. And I thought, you know, there's a lot to be said for taking risks, like, you know, taking risks. I'm not an advocate
but that is,
life
I
risk,
think that's very true, maybe more so of our generation than others. Was that whole thing of taking risks and not opting for security. And that was very much our story all through the, and well, what will be interesting for we're more of the 60s women, although you had children very young, and I did the opposite.
I mean, opting against the 50s woman stereotype, that Betty Friedan, you know, just...
well, like our mothers.
Yes.
I mean, it looked like drudgery, you know, drudgery.
Mom
No
before,
commitments.
make
No
the meal, right.
But it'll be interesting because my last guest just turned 90, and he's an incredible guy, and he's a Kingston resident, and I thought he was like in his 70s when I met him, but it'll be interesting to see, hey, what risks he's taking. Anyway, we're out of time, but thanks for coming from Gardner and sharing this, and I guess I can't say I may go to the grave never having done it, but maybe some of you out there will choose to do so.
Right, and Skydive the Ranch is a wonderful place to do it. They've got a great safety record.
I should put them in my
I
Hudson
love the
Valley
tandem
guide.
master I had. You should.
Yeah,
It's
because
a wonderful
that's something.
place.
I don't think I have skydiving. I have ballooning, but the Hudson Valley guide, I didn't include that. Maybe I have to fill out forms.
Right.
Anyway, thanks a lot, Evelyn, for coming over here and to this side of the river to take the show.
Oh, it's been fun talking about it.
Great.
Thank you, Joanne.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Good skydive.
Oh, yes, yes.
We had
Wonderful.
fun. Happy birthday.
I agree, it's the best thing you can do with your clothes on. I agree with you. You're right.
I'd like to introduce my last guest, but not least, my insurance agent, Lou Casharo, who is well, I don't know how many agents there are now, but one of many family business that merged Casharo Insurance with Reese Insurance and is now the Reese Group, located on North Front Street in Kingston. And he also was my son's softball coach and a friend. So, Lou, thanks for joining me.
You're welcome, Joanne.
Some of you out there may be wondering why Lou is here. He's not 50. And he's here to talk about an issue that many of us who are over 50 wrestle with, and that is the insurance issue. Beyond health insurance, which is another can of worms, there's all kinds of life insurance and all kinds of things. It's a very confusing morass to navigate through. And I'm pleased to say that the people at your agency have been very helpful to me, especially after my divorce, because I knew very little about this because my ex-husband dealt with it. He was interested more in it. I mean, I'm learning, and I've learned, but I really didn't know too much about it. So, what do you think? What do you think for those of us heading up there? I mean, I always think I got my car insurance under, that's taken care of. I got the health insurance thing, that's good for me. But what would you suggest to most people, just in general? What
In
kinds
general,
of
or
tips
as they're
would you
turning,
give?
as
As
they're
their
approaching
age at
50?
50 and they're dealing with elderly parents, as well
Right.
as like you and I, our sons are going off to school or getting out of high school. What do you think about what we should do?
There's many concerns that people approaching 50 have. The baby boomers are all now in their 50s to 55-year-olds age group, and often, when your insurance agent calls you when you're in your 30s and wants to talk to you about retirement issues and estate planning and things like that, people, it's human nature, generally don't want to talk about that.
Right.
When they turn 50 and they're starting to think about preserving their assets, if they have assets, or they're going to talk about, working on a fixed income with the need for, health insurance or the need to supplement health insurance. There's many different issues. Also, if someone works for a corporation and they have a retirement plan or a qualified retirement plan, there's issues revolving around that.
Okay.
So there's a lot of things to think about.
Right. Like I'm self-employed, and so are many people where we live in Woodstock.
Right.
So that's even other issues because, like, I don't have disability insurance, but I'm a one-person business. And that's always, I skate every day. I always think, what if I break my leg? What am I going to do, So there are certain things that I'm starting to think in a way I never thought. I mean, I don't stop skating, but I'm just saying, it's a possibility.
That's right.
I ski,
Mhm.
So what you're saying is that maybe everybody should go in and try to have their personal situation sort of looked over?
It's a
Is
great
that what-
idea.
Do you charge for that?
We don't charge for estate planning.
Mhm.
And for looking at or interviewing and seeing what people's concerns are, what people's needs may be. That's a service that we do. And then we can recommend a variety of different tools,
Mhm.
a variety of different devices which will help people achieve their long-term goals.
I see.
Financially, health-wise, things like
I
that.
see.
So
Now, tell me that your father started Casharo Insurance a long time ago, and he had 3 sons, and all 3 of you went into the business. That's unusual.
And it's kind of a funny story. My father was working in the industry in Kingston since 1955, which was a year before I was born. And when I was a junior in college, he left an employer that he was working with for a long time and established his own agency. Pretty chancy move. At that time, my 2 younger brothers, Frank and Paul, were musicians and were actively pursuing a professional career in the music industry. So I graduated from college, went into the armed forces. My 2 younger brothers were scattered to other parts of this United States, touring with musical groups, and my dad was running this business. So a bunch of events occurred, and the boys all came together and started to work with Dad.
How long ago was that?
That was in 1985.
Really? So
Mhm.
for 15 years. So that's a while. And you're still together. That's longer than most marriages.
That's right. And my brothers and I are not only brothers, but very dear friends still.
Oh, that's great. No, that's really good. Well, every time I go there, I mean, it's funny because I know you from Woodstock. It's funny, they were in the music business, you ended up in Woodstock.
Right.
But it's interesting because somebody's always available there, like all the time. I mean, it's a large agency now. How many
But it has a
agents are
family
there?
feel.
But there's a feeling
Right.
that it's not a corporate kind of place. How many agents are there now working there?
We have 45 employees and actually 3 locations. one in New Windsor, one in Saugerties, and of course our main office is in Kingston.
Oh, so you are in throughout the Hudson Valley?
Right.
I didn't realize
We're
that.
basically scattered from northern to southern Ulster County.
Okay.
And, you know, we have...
Well, New Windsor is orange, is outside of Newburgh.
Yeah, New Windsor is actually orange, that's right.
Yeah.
So we have, you know, good representation, and of course we work in the Dutchess County area, Greene
Mhm.
County, some work in Sullivan, not too much, and of course Orange. So.
No, but I remember, because when a few months ago, I got a new used car, once again.
Mhm.
Maybe someday I'll be rich enough to buy a new car. And I wasn't sure, because again, like insurance, cars are another thing. I'm friends with my mechanic, but it's confusing.
Put gas
to me.
in it, turn the key, it
Hey,
goes, okay.
But I'm learning. I've learned in the last 10 years. But I remember stopping by because I had to do the insurance thing, and I said, the agents I worked with was fine, but I wanted to see you to just tell you to run it by you what I did.
Mhm.
And you told me the book value. You know, you were it was 5 minutes, but it was just great that you were around, you were there, and you know, I felt better about the buying it. And I'm very pleased 3 months later.
Well, thank you.
So anyway, it was very helpful.
That's
Plus, the person who sold it to me gave it to me for a couple $1,000s under the book
Under
value,
that
which
book value.
it was very nice that you informed me.
So you made a good deal.
So I did. In my ignorance, I did do that. So that was encouraging. But it was very interesting to me that I just feel people have always been very available. And I think when an accident, I've never had a car accident, but in the event, when people generally meet their insurance agents or get to know them, when that under the worst circumstances. So I guess it's important that somebody's always around and who you trust.
Well, that's part of the system, of the independent agency system, and why we think that we're going to continue to deliver value to people, to consumers. We have a one-on-one relationship with our clients, and let's face it, when you have insurance, it's a vague concept. When you need it, you want somebody there. You want to have someone that can help you navigate through a claim or that type of
So
circumstance.
why did this nice family business with the father and 3 brothers merge into another firm? Why did you feel, everything's getting bigger, but why did you need to do that?
The smaller agent is having a very difficult time in the modern marketplace. And although we were, you know, showing steady growth on an annual level, almost 10% a year for at least the 5 years that my brothers and I were kind of heading up the agency, we saw the future, you know, our future being a little bit troubled. So we approached Frank Reese, who's the founder of the Reese Group, and talked to him about, you know, the potential of merging our organizations. And, you know, in that, we provided both a
Does he do
perpetuation
different
plan.
insurance than you do? Was it not, you were not competing? I'm trying to understand.
No, he does.
He does the
He
same
was a
thing.
competitor.
I see.
He was a competitor, but he, you know, had it. You know, our agencies were kind of going in 2 different directions.
Mm-hmm.
His was kind of stable, while ours was a growth agency, and we saw it as an opportunity to kind of get that synergy going, put a stable, you know, get the growth agency with a stable agency, and really make something good happen. Also, economies of scale. And you know, through that we have, you know, managed to build a formidable agency. So we're really happy about it.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I think it's interesting that a family business merged with another, you know, the company that, well, I guess it's sort of a family business too. I don't know, does Frank Reese have his children, any of his children involved?
No, he has one child. She's actually an assistant district attorney for Ulster County and has no interest in the insurance business. But you know, he kind of inherited 3 sons, I guess. So
Did your father retire?
my father retired about 8 years ago. My mom passed away about 5 years ago. So he is still, you know, very active. Now he's doing the things he loves, which is gardening and, you know, kind of caring for grandchildren. And,
Is he
and
from
just being-
Kingston?
We grew up in Kingston. My dad's originally from Kansas.
Oh, is he?
Yes.
That's interesting. I don't meet many people who move to Kingston from Kansas. They both begin with K, but, you know, that's about it. Oh, that's interesting. What brought him to Kingston?
He was in the Navy in World War II in the Korean War, and he had gone, you know, back to Kansas, completed his college education after the war, and his parents decided to move here. they had, my grandmother, Casharo, had relatives in Kingston, New York.
Oh, really?
And she decided, they decided to bring their family here, and after my dad completed his education, he came to Kingston. So that's where he met my mom, and that was in about 1953.
Wow. Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I was found out that Kingston's population has been about 22,000 for many, many, many years. It has not, we all think it's growing because
Right,
all these malls are coming and all this shopping. But actually, it's interesting. It's been pretty much the same size for
It really
decades.
has. And it's really unique because in Ulster County, Kingston is the only city.
Right.
It's the only
That's
real
right.
city. Everything else are townships, villages, towns, town seats, that type of thing. So, Kingston is Ulster County is basically a rural county.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, it's very historic because it was the first capital of New York State. And, it's very interesting. I mean, the way it's laid out, nobody who comes here can figure out. And I remember the first time when my husband and I moved here, and we drove through Kingston, Uptown, Broadway, the Miracle Mile, where there was no Hudson Valley Mall at the time. It was just the stores.
Mm-hmm.
It was very confusing. So it's an interesting little place,
It's an interesting
isn't it?
town. Kind of grew from the Rondout Creek and all
Right.
that trade down there. So, and you can see that. Pretty
Yeah,
historic.
no, it's really nice.
It's interesting.
But, well, I mean, now you live in Woodstock, correct?
do,
Yeah. What made you move there?
My parents had a home. It was kind of my mom's adopted godfather.
Mm-hmm.
Had a home there. He was an artist in Woodstock. His name was Paul Arndt.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of him.
A student of the
Mhm.
Frederick Church landscape type
Frederick
style.
Church from Olana.
Frederick
Yeah.
Church from Olana, and he had an old stone house and no survivor, no children,
Uh-huh.
and he left his home to my parents.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and my parents wanted their kids close, and they actually subdivided, and we created a little Italian embassy up there. And all that stuff.
It is a very pretty spot off near, I know where it is, so
Yeah,
the library, it's very nice. Well, listen, I really appreciate your coming here and telling us a little bit about what you do. Obviously, I can't go into the details of the insurance business here because it's so confusing and everybody's situation is so different. It's like health insurance.
Mhm.
You got to consider, who you are, what your needs are. But I have to say that, it's been a pleasure dealing with your agency, and I very rarely deal with you because, you're busy doing the business of the agency, I guess.
Well, we have a lot of good people.
Yeah,
We're very
you do.
fortunate. So, and for those people who are approaching 50, the time to start thinking about estate planning and those issues
And wills.
revolving around the graying of our society need to really be addressed. Not before it's too late. And your independent agent will help you. He'll help you do that. So.
No, that's great. Do you help people do wills? Because that's a big thing that,
We generally don't get into that. That's more in
Legal-
the legal
legal
realm,
thing.
legal services.
but you can,
But we can certainly help them with the different facets
Mhm.
of a will. So
no, that's great. Well, listen, thanks a lot for taking time out of your busy
you're
day to
welcome
come here.
very much.
And
We've been talking about doing this for a long time.
Yes,
It's good
we
that
have.
I finally made it.
I know. Well, life is, it's like, it takes time, but everything falls into place eventually, I believe. So,
Very much.
thanks again, and I hope I don't soon. Take care, bye-bye.
Yeah.
out of your busy
You're
day to
welcome
come here.
very much.
And
We've been talking about doing this for a long time.
Yes,
It's good that I finally made it. Even
I know. Well, you know, life is, it's like, it takes time, but everything falls into place eventually, I believe. So have a good day, the rest of your day,
Thanks very much.
and thanks again, and I hope I don't see you soon. Take care, bye-bye.
Yeah.